They laughed when I walked into the wedding. Not loudly at first, not openly, just enough for me to hear it. The kind of laughter people use when they don't think you deserve to notice. I felt it before I understood it, that sudden thinning of conversation. The way voices dropped, then reappeared behind hands and smiles. The way the air shifted, as if the room itself had inhaled and decided not to let me breathe. The doors closed softly behind me, but the sound echoed in my chest. Crystal chandeliers glowed above rows of white-covered tables. Everything smelled like roses, champagne, and money. Men in tailored suits stood confidently beside women wrapped in silk and diamonds. Every detail screamed belonging. And then there was me, a black woman standing alone at the entrance of a wedding that clearly wasn't meant for someone like me. I adjusted my grip on my purse strap and took one step forward. That's when I heard it. "Is she lost?" A pause. "Maybe she's with the staff." Someone laughed again, sharper this time. Another voice followed. "This is a private event." I kept walking. Each step felt heavier, like the marble floor was trying to push me back out. Eyes moved with me, not curious eyes, measuring eyes. The kind that decide who you are before you open your mouth. I had worn my best dress. Navy blue, modest, elegant, nothing loud, nothing that could be twisted into an excuse. My shoes made almost no sound, but somehow every step still felt exposed. I told myself not to look around, not to shrink, not to apologize for existing, but humiliation has weight, and I was carrying all of it. A man stepped into my path, tall, white, perfectly pressed gray suit. His smile was polite in the way people are polite when they're about to dismiss you. "Ma'am," he said quietly, "the service entrance is outside." "I'm a guest," I replied. He looked me up and down, slowly, carefully, like he was searching for confirmation. "I'll need to see your invitation." Behind him, heads turned. Phones appeared. A woman near the front table leaned toward her friend and whispered something that made them both laugh. I reached into my purse and pulled out the envelope. Thick paper, cream-colored, my name written clearly across the front. He opened it, read it once, then again. His smile faded just enough for me to notice. "This must be a mistake," he said. Before I could respond, a woman stepped beside him, pearls at her neck, confidence in every movement. The kind of woman who never questioned whether she belonged anywhere. "What's going on?" she asked. "She says she's a guest," he replied. The woman turned to me fully now. Her eyes held no curiosity, just irritation. "Sweetheart," she said, "this is the Whitmore wedding." "I know," I said. She laughed, not kindly. "This is a very exclusive event." "I'm aware." Her smile tightened. "Then you must also know you don't belong here." The laughter behind her grew louder now, more comfortable, more certain. My face burned, not because I was wrong, because being humiliated in public does something violent to the soul, even when you know the truth. For a moment, I considered leaving. I imagined turning around, walking back through those doors, letting them believe whatever version of me made them comfortable. But then I remembered the invitation. I remembered how it felt when it arrived, 3 weeks earlier. No return address, heavy paper, my name written with care. I thought it was a joke at first. Then I read the groom's name, and my hands started shaking. I hadn't seen him in years. I hadn't expected to ever see him again. I almost didn't come. I stood in my apartment holding that invitation, arguing with myself. telling myself it wasn't worth reopening old wounds, telling myself I'd only embarrass myself. But something inside me said, you have every right to be there. Standing in that ballroom, surrounded by judgment, I understood something clearly. If I walked away now, I would be doing exactly what they expected. I'm here for the groom, I said. The woman laughed louder. We all are. Someone behind her said, does she even know his name? My heart pounded. The room leaned in. Phones raised higher. People were waiting for me to fail, waiting for proof that their laughter was justified. I took a breath. Yes, I said, I know his name. The woman crossed her arms. Then say it. Time slowed. This was the moment where I either disappeared or changed everything. I said his name. At first, nothing happened. The laughter continued. Someone clapped sarcastically. A man near the aisle shook his head. Then I noticed it, near the altar. The groom stopped smiling. His body went still. His eyes lifted and locked onto mine. The music kept playing. The laughter echoed. No one else noticed yet, but I did. And I knew, before anyone else in that room realized it, that this wedding was about to change forever. For a few seconds after I said his name, nothing changed. The laughter didn't stop. The music didn't pause, glasses still clinked. People were still smiling, still enjoying themselves, still convinced that whatever this moment was, it was entertainment. Except the groom. I watched his face carefully, afraid to hope too soon. His smile had vanished, replaced by something tight and unreadable. He looked at me the way someone looks at a memory they weren't prepared to face in public. But before he could move, before he could speak, the woman in pearls let out another laugh and waved her hand dismissively. Enough of this, she said. This is getting uncomfortable. That word again, uncomfortable. She turned to the man in the gray suit. Please escort her out. We have a ceremony to continue. The man nodded immediately, relieved to have permission. Two other men in dark suits appeared beside him. Security. They moved fast, efficient, like they'd done this before. One of them reached for my arm. Instinctively, I stepped back. Don't touch me, I said. The room shifted. That single sentence changed the energy. Not because I was wrong, but because I dared to say it out loud. A few guests murmured. Someone gasped softly, like I'd broken an unspoken rule. The guard's hand hovered in the air for a moment before closing around my wrist anyway. His grip was firm, professional, practiced. Ma'am, he said quietly, you need to leave. I was invited, I said, my voice shaking despite my effort to stay calm. You can check the invitation. We already did, the man in the gray suit replied. And there's been a mistake. The word mistake felt heavier than an insult. I looked around the room, searching faces for something human. Sympathy, doubt, recognition. But most eyes avoided mine now. People suddenly found their champagne glasses fascinating. Some leaned back in their chairs, clearly enjoying the spectacle without wanting responsibility for it. Phones were fully out now. No one tried to hide it. The guard tightened his grip. Please don't make this difficult. I laughed then, not because it was funny, because the alternative was crying and I refused to give them that. Difficult, I said. You dragged me into this. A woman near the aisle whispered loudly, why is she making a scene? Another voice followed. This is so inappropriate. Inappropriate. I wanted to scream. Instead, I straightened my back and lifted my chin. I'm not leaving, I said. Not until the groom says I don't belong here. That stopped them. Just for a second, the guards hesitated. The man in gray looked uncertain now. He glanced toward the altar. So did everyone else. For the first time since I entered, the room collectively noticed the groom's silence. He hadn't moved. He hadn't smiled again. He was staring at me like the world had cracked open in front of him. "Daniel," someone near him whispered, "is everything okay?" He didn't answer. The woman in pearls turned sharply toward him. "Daniel, we need to continue." That was when he took a step forward, just one. The music faltered, the violinist's bow dragging awkwardly across the strings before stopping completely. The silence that followed was heavy and unmistakable. The groom opened his mouth. But before he could speak, the woman in pearls cut in again, her voice sharper now, irritated. "Daniel, this woman is causing a disruption. Security is handling it." He looked at her slowly, then back at me, and something in his expression changed. Not confusion, not surprise, recognition. "Let her go," he said. The words weren't loud, but they carried. The guard froze. The woman in pearls laughed nervously. "Daniel, darling, you don't need to," I said. He repeated, louder this time. "Let her go." The guard released my wrist immediately, like he'd been burned. The room erupted in whispers. "What's happening? Does he know her? This is ridiculous." I rubbed my wrist slowly, my skin already tender, my pulse racing. Daniel took another step forward, then another. Every eye followed him now. He stopped a few feet away from me, close enough that I could see the tension in his jaw, the shallow rise and fall of his chest. "I didn't expect you to come," he said quietly. I swallowed. "I almost didn't." The woman in pearls stepped between us. "Daniel, we are in the middle of—" "Please step aside," he said. She stared at him like she didn't recognize him. "I'm sorry?" she asked. He didn't raise his voice, he didn't argue, he simply repeated himself. "Step aside." The room went completely silent. Slowly, reluctantly, she moved. Daniel looked at me again. "Are you okay?" The question was simple. The impact was not. I felt every eye in that room on my face. Waiting, judging, recalculating, I nodded. "I will be." He exhaled slowly, like he'd been holding his breath since the moment I walked in. "I owe you an apology," he said. A ripple of shock moved through the guests. "For what?" someone whispered. Daniel turned slightly so the room could hear him. "For letting anyone make you feel like you didn't belong here." The woman in pearls gasped audibly. "This is absurd," she snapped. "Daniel, this woman," he said, cutting her off, "is the reason I'm standing here today." Every head snapped toward me. The whispers exploded. The story they thought they understood began to crumble. And for the first time since I walked through those doors, the laughter was gone. The silence that followed his words felt heavier than the laughter had. People shifted in their chairs. A few coughed. Someone near the back dropped a fork, and the sound echoed too loudly against the marble floor. I could feel the room trying to rearrange itself around a truth it wasn't ready to accept. Daniel was still standing in front of me. Not the groom everyone had been smiling at minutes earlier. Not the polished centerpiece of a perfect wedding. Just a man, suddenly exposed, looking at me with something dangerously close to regret. "What does that mean?" the woman in pearls demanded. Her voice was sharp now, cracking at the edges. "Daniel, you're embarrassing yourself." He didn't look at her. Instead, he turned fully toward the guests. "I need everyone to listen," he said. A murmur rippled through the room. Chairs scraped as people leaned forward. Phones were still raised, but no one was laughing anymore. Whatever this was, it wasn't entertainment now. It was uncomfortable in a way they couldn't dismiss. Daniel took a breath. "This woman," he said, gesturing toward me, "is not a stranger." I felt my heart pounding so loudly I was sure the microphones near the stage could pick it up. "She's not lost. She's not staff. She's not here by accident." The woman in pearls shook her head. "Daniel, stop. You don't owe anyone an explanation." He finally looked at her then. "Yes," he said quietly, "I do." The word landed hard. He turned back to the room. "Her name is—" I stopped him. "Don't," I said, my voice surprised even me. It wasn't loud, but it carried. Every eye snapped back to me. Daniel hesitated. "Are you sure?" I nodded. "They've already decided who I am. Let them sit with that first." A few people looked uncomfortable now. Some crossed their arms. Some avoided my gaze entirely. The shift was subtle but undeniable. The certainty they'd carried earlier was gone, replaced with unease. Daniel stepped slightly to the side, giving me space. And for the first time since I walked into that ballroom, I spoke to the room. "You laughed when I came in," I said. "You assumed I didn't belong before you asked a single question." No one interrupted me. "You told yourselves a story about me because it was easier than being wrong." I glanced toward the woman in pearls. She stared back at me, lips pressed tight, eyes cold. "I didn't come here to cause a scene," I continued. "I came because I was invited, and because some stories don't disappear just because they make people uncomfortable." A man near the front whispered to his wife, "What is she talking about?" Daniel answered for me. "She's talking about the past," he said. "About choices I made before any of you knew my name." A wave of shock passed through the room. The woman in pearls turned to him. "Daniel, whatever this is, it can wait. We have guests, your parents." "My parents know," he said. That shut her up. He looked back at me. "If you want me to say it, I will." I studied his face. The boy I once knew was still there, buried beneath years of privilege and distance. I wondered how many nights he'd convinced himself this moment would never come. "Say it," I said. He nodded. "We grew up together," Daniel said to the room. "Same neighborhood. Same schools, same dreams." A few gasps escaped. "We were friends before life pulled us in different directions." Friends? The word felt both accurate and incomplete. He continued anyway. "When things got hard for her family, she stepped up. When things got easy for mine, I stepped away." The room was dead silent now. "I left," he said, "and I never looked back." His voice faltered slightly. "I told myself I was doing what I had to do. That people change. That some relationships don't survive success." He swallowed. "But the truth is I chose comfort over loyalty." The woman in pearls took a step toward him. "Daniel, stop this right now." He ignored her. "I built a life that looks perfect from the outside," he said, "and I let the people who helped shape me become invisible." I felt something tighten in my chest, not satisfaction, not revenge, recognition. Daniel turned to me again. "I invited you because I realized something a few months ago." "What?" I asked quietly. "That I'd spent my entire life running from the version of myself that knew you." A low murmur spread through the room. "And tonight," he added, "you walked in and reminded me exactly who I became in the process." No one laughed. No one whispered. The room was holding its breath. The woman in pearls looked around desperately, as if expecting someone to save her from this unraveling. Daniel, this is not the time or place. He finally raised his voice. This is exactly the time and place. He turned to the guests again. If anyone here feels uncomfortable, you're free to leave. No one moved, not a single person. The power dynamic had shifted completely now. The same people who had laughed minutes earlier sat frozen, suddenly unsure of their footing. Daniel looked at me one last time. "I'm sorry," he said. For now, for letting you be treated like this." The apology wasn't perfect, but it was public, and it changed everything. I nodded once. "Thank you." He exhaled like he'd been holding that breath for years. But the reckoning wasn't over. Because as the room began to stir again, as people whispered new theories and recalculated their opinions, I noticed something important. Someone else had been listening very closely. Someone near the back of the room. Someone whose face had gone pale. Someone who suddenly realized that my presence didn't just threaten a wedding. It threatened a reputation. And that was when I understood the real fallout was just beginning. The room didn't explode the way people expect moments like that to explode. There was no shouting, no dramatic walkouts, no applause. Instead, there was something worse. A slow, uncomfortable awareness spreading from table to table like a stain no one knew how to clean. People leaned toward one another, whispering behind their hands, but the tone had changed. Earlier, the whispers were amused, confident, cruel. Now they were nervous, defensive, careful. I could almost hear the questions forming in their heads. Who is she really? What did we just witness? And most importantly, who saw us laugh? Phones stayed raised, but now they weren't recording for entertainment. They were recording for protection, evidence, insurance against being on the wrong side of the story. Daniel stepped back beside me, no longer trying to shield me, no longer trying to explain me. He stood there as if he understood something fundamental had shifted and that stepping in front of it would only make things worse. The woman in pearls hadn't moved. Her face had drained of color, replaced by a brittle smile that looked painfully rehearsed. She scanned the room, reading it the way people like her always do, measuring loyalty, searching for allies. "I think we should all take a moment," she said finally, forcing a laugh. "This has gotten wildly out of hand." No one responded. She turned toward Daniel again, her voice lowering. "We can discuss this privately." "There's nothing private about it anymore," he replied. That sentence landed hard. A man near the back stood up abruptly. I recognized him immediately. One of Daniel's sponsors. A donor whose name had been engraved on plaques near the entrance. "This is inappropriate," he said, loudly enough to reclaim attention. "This wedding is not the place for personal confessions." Daniel looked at him calmly. "Then maybe it shouldn't have been the place for public humiliation either." A murmur rippled through the room. The man's jaw tightened. "Are you accusing anyone here of something?" I answered before Daniel could. "Yes." Every head turned toward me again. I hadn't planned to speak, but silence had already done enough damage tonight. "I was laughed at," I said. Questioned, grabbed, all before anyone bothered to ask who I was. The man scoffed. "People misunderstand things all the time." "Not like this," I said. "Not unless they're comfortable doing it." A woman at a nearby table shifted uncomfortably. She avoided my gaze. I remembered her laugh clearly. It had been sharp, Enjoyed. This isn't about misunderstanding, I continued. It's about assumptions. Daniel nodded slowly beside me. And accountability, he added. That word made several people visibly tense. The woman in pearls stepped forward again, her composure cracking. This is becoming a spectacle. It already was, I said quietly. Just not one you were uncomfortable with. That did it. A few people stood up, not to leave, to see better, to position themselves closer to the story unfolding in front of them. Someone whispered my name. Someone else asked Daniel a question under their breath. And then someone did the thing I knew would happen eventually. They asked why I mattered. "Why is she so important to you?" A woman near the aisle asked. "Why invite her now?" The question wasn't cruel. It was worse. It was dismissive. Daniel didn't answer right away. He looked at me first, silently asking permission. I nodded. "Because she was there before any of this," he said. "Before the money, before the image, before the version of me you all know." I felt my chest tighten. "When my family was struggling," he continued, "hers was, and instead of pulling away, she pulled closer." A few people shifted uncomfortably. "She helped my mother when no one else would. She watched over me when my parents were working double shifts. She believed in me when believing in me didn't come with a return." The room was very quiet now. "And when my life changed," he said, "I let her disappear." The woman in pearls shook her head sharply. "This is manipulative. You're letting guilt control you." "No," he replied. "I'm letting truth catch up to me." I exhaled slowly. I hadn't come here expecting vindication. I hadn't come here expecting an apology in front of hundreds of people. But I also hadn't come prepared for what came next. A woman near the back raised her hand slightly, like she was in a meeting. "I saw what happened when she arrived," she said. "Security didn't ask questions. They acted immediately." All eyes turned toward the guards. One of them shifted, clearly uncomfortable. "We were instructed to keep the event smooth." "Instructed by who?" someone asked. The woman in pearls stiffened. The guard hesitated. Daniel spoke before he could stop himself. "By her." The accusation landed like a dropped plate. "That's ridiculous," the woman snapped. "I was protecting the event." "You were protecting your comfort," Daniel replied. A few gasps escaped. "This woman embarrassed us," the woman in pearls said sharply, gesturing toward me. "She showed up without warning. I was invited," I reminded her. "And disrupted a carefully planned day," she finished, ignoring me. Daniel turned toward the guests again. "This wedding isn't about perfection," he said. "And if it is, then it's built on something rotten." That was when I noticed movement near the doors. Someone had slipped out quietly. Then another. People weren't leaving because they were offended. They were leaving because they understood. This moment wasn't going away. By the time the music resumed, softly and awkwardly, the room felt smaller. The glamour thinner. The certainty gone. Daniel leaned toward me. "You don't have to stay," he said quietly. "I know," I replied. I looked around one last time at the faces that had laughed, stared, judged. "I think I will," I said, "because walking out now wouldn't protect me. Staying would." And as I stood there, grounded, visible, and no longer alone, I realized something else. This story wasn't ending at the wedding. It was just beginning. By the time the ceremony was supposed to begin, nothing felt sacred anymore. People were still seated, but no one was settled. Conversations buzzed low and uneasy, like a swarm that didn't know where to land. The flowers at the altar looked excessive now, almost mocking, as if beauty itself had shown up overdressed for a reckoning. Daniel stayed beside me, but he didn't touch me, not out of distance, out of respect. For once, he wasn't trying to fix anything. He was letting the moment exist. Across the room, the woman in pearls had retreated to a corner with two older men and a woman in a silver gown. Their heads were bent close together, faces tight. This wasn't damage control anymore. This was survival. I caught fragments as I passed. This is going to look bad. Someone is recording everything. We need to get ahead of this, ahead of the truth. A woman I didn't recognize approached me slowly. She looked nervous, unsure if she was allowed to speak. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I laughed earlier, I shouldn't have." Her apology wasn't dramatic. It wasn't perfect, but it was real enough to land. "Thank you," I said. She nodded quickly and disappeared back into the crowd, her face flushed with something like shame. Not everyone apologized. Some people avoided me completely, suddenly fascinated by their phones or champagne glasses. Others looked at me with new curiosity, as if I had transformed into something worth studying now that I had been validated. That part hurt more than the laughter ever did, because it proved I was never invisible, just unimportant until someone powerful said otherwise. Daniel's parents finally stood. His mother's face was tight with emotion she didn't know where to put. His father looked older than he had an hour earlier. "We need a moment," his mother said gently to the guests. "Please." No one argued. People respected money. They respected legacy. They respected names. They were learning to respect me by accident. Daniel turned to me. "I didn't expect this to unravel tonight." "I didn't come to unravel anything," I said. "I came because I was invited." He nodded slowly. "I know." We stood there while his parents spoke quietly with him. I didn't listen. I didn't need to. I already knew what was happening behind those polite expressions. They were realizing that control is fragile when truth is watching. A man approached Daniel, one of the donors, the same one who had objected earlier. "This is unfortunate," the man said, "but you need to understand what this does to your image." Daniel looked at him calmly. "My image survived just fine when I let people like her be humiliated." The man frowned. "That's not what I meant." "It's exactly what you meant," Daniel replied. The man walked away. I felt a strange calm settle over me then. The kind that comes when you've already lost everything you were afraid to lose. There was nothing left they could take from me. A notification buzzed on my phone, then another, then another. I glanced down. Someone had already posted the video. The caption was short. "She was invited. They laughed anyway." I felt my stomach drop. By the time I looked up again, more phones were buzzing around the room. Guests checked screens, whispered urgently, turned pale. The story had escaped the ballroom. It was alive now. A woman near the back let out a sharp breath. "Oh my God, this is everywhere." The woman in pearls saw the shift immediately. Panic flickered across her face before she masked it again. "This is getting out of hand," she snapped. "We need to stop recording." No one listened. You can't put a lid back on something once the truth starts breathing. Daniel leaned toward me. "If you want to leave, I'll make sure." "No," I said, not angry, not emotional, just cert. "I stayed through the humiliation," I continued. I can stay through the consequences. Something in his expression changed. Pride, maybe, or relief. A few minutes later, the officiant quietly packed up his papers. The ceremony was officially postponed, though no announcement was made. Everyone already knew. This wedding was no longer the main event. The woman in pearls finally approached me again. Up close, she looked smaller, less polished, less untouchable. "You didn't have to do this," she said quietly. "I didn't," I replied. "You did." Her jaw tightened. "People are misunderstanding." "No," I said. "They're seeing clearly for the first time." She searched my face, maybe looking for cruelty, for satisfaction, for revenge. She didn't find it. "I hope it was worth it," she said bitterly. I met her gaze steadily. "So do I." She turned away without another word. As the room slowly emptied, something unexpected happened. People started stopping me. Some apologized. Some thanked me. Some admitted they'd been silent too many times before. And each conversation chipped away at something I'd been carrying for years, the idea that dignity had to be earned in rooms like this. Daniel stood in the center of it all, watching quietly. "I don't know what happens next," he said to me when the last guests had begun to leave. "Neither do I replied. But for the first time, that uncertainty didn't scare me, because whatever came next, it wouldn't belong only to them. It would belong to the truth. And the truth, once spoken, doesn't ask permission to stay. The ballroom looked different once most of the guests were gone. Not quieter, emptier. The kind of empty that reveals things you couldn't see when the room was full of noise and certainty. Chairs sat half pushed back from tables. Abandoned champagne flutes caught the light like they were waiting for hands that would never return. The flowers were still beautiful, but now they felt excessive, like decorations for a celebration that had decided not to happen. I stood near the doors for a moment, breathing in air that finally felt like it belonged to me. Daniel walked over slowly. No cameras near us now. No audience, just two people standing in the aftermath of something neither of us could undo. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said. I believed him. "Good," I replied, "because I didn't come here to give it." He nodded once, accepting that without argument. "I came because I was tired of pretending that what happened didn't matter," I continued, "and because I was done shrinking to make other people comfortable." "I know," he said, "and I'm glad you didn't." We stood in silence for a while. Not awkward, honest. Outside, I could hear voices. Reporters had arrived. Someone had tipped them off. Of course they had. The story was too neat, too symbolic, too uncomfortable to stay contained. "Whatever happens next," Daniel said quietly, "I'll take responsibility." "That's not for me to decide," I replied. "That's for you to live with." I walked past him toward the exit. No one stopped me this time. The night air hit my face like a release. Cool, real, unfiltered. Cameras flashed as soon as I stepped outside. Questions flew from every direction. "How did it feel?" "Did you expect this?" "What do you want to happen now?" I didn't answer, because the truth didn't need my commentary anymore. It had already spoken. Over the next few days, the video spread faster than anyone could control. Different angles, different captions, different opinions, but the core never changed. A Black woman was humiliated at a wedding. And the people who laughed were exposed. The woman in pearls issued a statement, carefully worded, defensive, empty. It made things worse. Daniel issued one too, Simple, direct, he didn't defend himself, he didn't explain away the moment, he acknowledged it. That mattered. Some people lost partnerships, some lost invitations. Some lost the illusion that silence protects you when you're wrong. The wedding never resumed, not that weekend, not later. And somehow that felt right. Weeks passed. Life settled in new ways. I went back to my routines, my work, my quiet, but something in me had shifted permanently. I noticed it the first time I walked into a room and didn't immediately calculate how much space I was allowed to take. The first time I didn't soften my voice to sound less threatening. The first time I didn't apologize before speaking. I had spent years believing dignity was fragile. That night taught me it's resilient. Daniel and I spoke once more. Briefly. Honestly. He told me the truth about why he invited me. Not guilt, not nostalgia, shame, and a realization that the life he'd built had erased too much of himself in the process. I don't know who I am without all of this, he admitted. That's not my burden, I said, and it was. What happened at that wedding didn't make me powerful. It reminded me that I already was. I didn't walk in to prove anything. I walked in because I belonged. And the moment they laughed was the moment they showed the world exactly who they were. Not me. People still ask if I regret going. I never hesitate. No, because sometimes walking into the room isn't about being welcomed. It's about being seen. And once you are seen, truly seen, no one gets to laugh you out of your own story again.